National 9 News tonight. A Port Adelaide hat-trick with the third premiership in a row. And media magnate Kerry Packer suffers a massive heart attack. Good evening. More on Kerry Packer later in the bulletin, but first it's been a sensational day for South Australian football. Let's get straight into it. Here's Greg Rees.
Georgie, special day, perfect weather, a jam-packed stadium and the all-time goal-kicking record to Scott Hodges with the highlights of a very memorable day. Kenneth Cunningham.
Thanks very much, Greg. Yes, it certainly was a colourful day here at Football Park. The crowd got here at about 7:30 this morning. The game was magnificent. There were black and gold balloons and banners everywhere. Likewise, the Port Adelaide supporters were very pumped up about this particular grand final, and you had to be here to see it because it was an absolutely sensational feeling before the game. And in fact, Vicky Jobe caught up with all the pre-game excitement.
Many couldn't wait until today. The atmosphere began at midnight when devotees gathered at Football Park for a barbecue. At first light, thousands converged in the car park showing their true colours.
A tiger for me, a tiger for me. Tigers by nature are wild and they're free. Cheer the black and the white, honor the magpies day and by night.
Some hedged their bets, preferring an each-way tip. As the game edged nearer, rivalry intensified.
Black boys!
Inside Football Park, caterers geared up for the invasion. Down at the heart of Port Adelaide, the traditional pilgrimage and blessing of the opposition.
Everyone on their knees! Everyone on your knees!
Up the road at Alberton, last-minute preparations for tonight's party. More than 100 kegs of beer were on order for inside the club rooms, with 36,000 cans of beer ready on the oval. The Magpies souvenir machine is expected to work overtime throughout the evening. Mugs, glasses, T-shirts and hats were to be trucked to Alberton each hour if Port took out the premiership. At Brighton Road, they were expecting 20,000 for hopeful victory celebrations. 20,000 beer cans and 10,000 cans of spirit mixers were being trucked in. 800 different food items will be available. Back at the scene of today's showdown, the bird's-eye view was spectacular. The massive supporters here are gearing themselves for a titanic football match, inspired even more so by the two clubs' off-field battle in the courtrooms.
And I hope there's no fights or anything like that. I hope they play football.
There's going to be a lot of emotion between the two sides, isn't there? For sure.
Mixed opinions also on whether this will be the last first-class final in South Australia if a local team enters the AFL next year.
It'll make football different from now on, but that's progress.
I think it's just a grand final, no matter what it is.
With minutes remaining until the battle royal, pop star Kate Sobrano brought the crowd alive. Finally, it was here, the 1990 Grand Final, the end of an era. Vicky Jobe, National 9 News.
Well, I guess in some way it was a pretty emotional day because today's grand final was the last we would have seen of that over the last, 117 years of football here in South Australia. It was a very important game for both Port Adelaide and Glenelg, but let's have a look at the highlights of Port Adelaide's 30th grand final win.
It was picture postcard at West Lakes when the two sides ran onto Football Park. Kate Sobrano had some of the moves, but the rest were made by Corns and Cale. Corns picked Matthew Liptak on a flank, while Cale tagged Marshall with Abernethy. However, Scott Hodges was where he always is, alert in the goal square. It took Port 14 minutes to get their first goal. Seconds later, Marnie made it a pair. Rod Jamieson was on the forward line but played like a rover, getting a string of lucky bounces for the Tigers first. The punches flew a short time later, and Wayne Marnie was losing a bit of nose claret. Glenelg's undisciplined play cost them a goal when a 50-metre penalty put Darren Smith's shot out of question. But then the Bay's John Fidge roared out of his slumber. His two strong goals in time on gave the Tigers a 3-point lead at quarter time. The two sides slogged it out in the second quarter until the 18-minute mark when Hodges burst out with 2 goals in 3 minutes. Mark Williams then made it 3 in 4, and the Pies were looking at their premiership best. But then tragedy as Hodges fell awkwardly under a Glenelg defender and a knee injury had him off the arena. Glenelg lifted briefly with Michael Murphy taking a slips catch and converting. But then in time on, the Magpies burst away. Adrian Setre was brilliant with 2 opportunist goals. By half-time, Port had built its lead to 24 points. Hodges resumed after half-time, but Johnston didn't. Scott Salisbury showed some rare skills, pace and a long kick, and he gave the Tigers an early charge. Abernethy and Darren Smith paid the price for a lack of talk, but they had plenty to chat about after a great individual effort by Gavin Wanganeen that kept the Magpies' 24-point cushion. A juggling mark allowed Hodges to kick his record-equalling 151st goal, and his side went in at the final break, leading by 22 points. A 50-metre penalty against Abernethy gave Marshall the first goal of the final quarter, but the Magpies got a huge lift when Hodges took his characteristic leading mark and converted it for the record. That seemed to signal the beginning of the end for the Bays as Port began eyeing the cup. John Cale wasn't counting his chickens, and the Tigers weren't handing the match over on a plate. Murphy's goal brought the Bays closer. But not close enough. The Magpies home by 15 points, their 30th premiership, their 3rd in a row.
This is the best ever. The best ever, Brian.
George Fiacci won the medal for best of field.
All of you that have read in the press, there's one thing that really matters is that there'll always be a Port Adelaide Football Club. Thank you.
Mike Sexton, National 9 News.
Yes, it certainly was a great grand final, and Johnny Cale there, the Port Adelaide coach, saying it was the best ever. Well, that's an amazing situation. There's certainly a great deal of emotion about today's game, but Port were the better side on the day, but the Tigers certainly weren't disgraced. Well, the mood in the rooms was, in fact, poles apart, with the Magpies flying high.
It was an emotional time in the Port Adelaide change rooms, especially for spearhead Scott Hodges, who broke the goal-kicking record.
Oh, yeah, I feel really wrapped about that. I mean, it's been a great year, and, you know, I mean, the Maghera medal and so on, you know, it means nothing really unless you win that grand final. I mean, to me, that's all I wanted.
You know, I had the birth of my baby, and then all the boys over in Collingwood finally did the right thing. So, you know, I'd like to congratulate them if they're still watching this, because it was a great effort and really revved us boys up to get the same result over here.
Oh, fantastic, mate. It's all worth the money. You know, that's why I worked my guts out to sort of get back on the track and, you know, and be successful for this Saturday, you know.
The Glenelg captain and coach entered the room to pay their congratulations.
You really won the players' respect, although we've always respected you. You know, you were down to 18 blokes, and the courage that the 18 blokes showed on the ground was fantastic. That's what footy's all about, and, you know, take my hat off to you. It's a great effort. Emotion, discipline, desperation, commitment. And that's where the advantage was, and that's where you guys were magnificent.
Yes, Graham Corns there, and Chris McDermott, of course, from the Tigers. Well, earlier in the Nissan Cup Reserves, the Reserves Grand Final saw the upset there today with West Torrens coming from fifth spot. West Torrens 17 goals, 12-114, defeated Port Adelaide 11-11-77. Well, I've got no doubt, of course, that the celebrations will go on long and hard tonight at the Albert Oval. It's been a magnificent day here at Football Park. One of the best grand finals I've seen in many years. And Greg, you've missed some wonderful action here today at Football Park, old son.
I always miss the action, Kenny. Thanks very much. I'll be back with the rest of the sport later in the bulletin, but for the big news stories of the day, Georgina.
Thanks, Greg. Well, as we mentioned,
Glenelg. In the worst incident, the Staff Force was called to Port Adelaide after police officers were attacked by a mob.
Most of the celebrations last night were good times, but scenes became hectic at Alberton late in the evening. About 1 o'clock, a group broke into a freezer truck taking beer cans. A short time later, the fire brigade was called after a number of cartons were set alight. Police tried to break up a fight, but were pelted with beer cans and ice. They responded by calling in the Staff Force, who controlled the situation. 24 people were ejected from the Oval, 11 were arrested and given police bail to appear in the Port Adelaide court at a later date. 2 police officers were treated at the Royal Adelaide Hospital for eye and leg injuries. The Blues weren't restricted to supporters. Paul Northeast was having trouble signing autographs today after breaking his hand in a fight last night.
Missed the bloke into the wall, but that's another story anyway.
At Glenelg, a total of 4 people, including a woman, were arrested throughout the evening. 10 were ejected from the ground. 2 police, including a female officer, were injured. 1 was bitten while making an arrest. An AIDS test has been carried out and the officer has the all clear. Mike Sexton, National 9 News.
Businessman.
Especially those who poured into Port Adelaide's celebrations to salute the champions.
road.
Bruce Webber has issued a warning to the SANFL over their intention to enter the AFL. Webber claims the league will lose $5 million by the end of next season. Meanwhile, heads are still a bit sore down at Albion following a heavy night of partying.
The historic victory wasn't lost on the thousands of die-hard Magpie fans that flocked to Alberton. Inside, the Premiership team prepared for their introduction to the adoring throng. They were all there, the stars that had won the club 3 premierships in a row. The most vocal, Paul Northeast, who led the chorus. But the greatest cheer was reserved for the man who coached them to victory. Back here at Alberton today, the party atmosphere was still in the air, although there were more than just a few heavy heads. About 2,000 converged this afternoon to once again idolise their heroes. Greg Phillips was the unlikely interviewer of players such as Scott Hodges, who's believed to be having talks with various AFL clubs this week.
And all the rest ain't worth it unless you get a premiership.
The celebrations are guaranteed to go on long into the week. Despite Glenelg's deep disappointment at having lost the grand final, last night at Brighton Road, the party was in full swing. The players did their best to hide their hurt, hamming it up with the faithful gathering. Back at the Oval this morning, the big clean-up. Coach Graham Corns was still in shock and contemplating the seemingly black future of South Australian football.
I can see that we've had no alternative and we have to go in, but I still can't help but think it's not the right move for South Australian footy.
Corns says Scott Salisbury has denied rumours he'll retire, but a couple of other players could hang up the boots. The new colours were this morning added to the brewery chimney, which will be officially unveiled tomorrow. Vicky Jobe, National 9 News.
The holiday
side in the AFL. Webber's plea comes in the wake of the Magpies' historic premiership win, which sparked off one of the biggest parties ever in the Port.
Port Adelaide's 15-point victory over Glenelg in the last grand final for the competition as we've known it prompted Webber's appeal. The Port president wants the league to drop its proposal and run with the Magpies bid. The court drama, though, didn't detract from Port Adelaide's celebrations last night. Players dined with a select group of Magpie VIPs before their hectic schedule of appearances in front of supporters. The uncertainty of next year hasn't prompted veteran Greg Phillips to consider retirement yet.
Oh, well, I don't think I'll make the SA side, but I don't know, they're going to select 52, but if I get selected in it, I'll be trying to get in it, but if I don't get in it, well, I'll be still playing with Port Adelaide.
Port's third successive grand final victory holds a special place in the heart of every player.
Yep, that was the hardest of the 3 that we've won. The most pleasing, I suppose. Yep, just a bonus.
There was so much more pressure on us. I've never been as nervous for a game as what it was today. We weren't clear favourites. That was a certainty. Glenelg probably did start favourites, but before the AFL business, we really had to win to save face.
After the formal dinner, it was time to party on, and the thousands at Alberton knew only too well how to do that. When the moment of introducing the players arrived, the adoring fans couldn't contain themselves, as one by one their idols thanked supporters for standing by them and sharing their glory. Although, as Paul Northeast demonstrated, their football skills definitely outclassed singing abilities. At the Port, it was definitely time to bury the tiger, with players urging the crowd on in a display of unashamed Magpie parochialism. Record goal-kicking Scott Hodges missed the dinner and presentation because of injury, but found strength to arrive late at the club to join in the celebrations. At the Bay, it was a matter of drowning the sorrows and getting on with the wake, which was meant to be a celebration. Loyal Tigers supporters joined in with the defeated players, left to contemplate what could have been. In the light of day, business was brisk today back at Alberton as the Magpies bathe in their glory with the next round of celebrations to continue tomorrow with the brewery chimney unveiling. Craig McGann for the 10 Evening News.
A striking charge against Port ruckman David Hines has dampened Magpie celebrations. Hines and Scott Salisbury were both reported and are expected to appear before Commissioner Brian Martin later in the week.
Hines was reported by field umpire Rick Kinnear during the first quarter for striking Glenelg defender Ross Gibbs. The incident behind play sparked off an all-in brawl, which held up play for several minutes. Because Hines will be involved in tomorrow's brewery chimney unveiling, it's expected the club will request the tribunal hearing be deferred until later in the week. Hines will join the West Coast Eagles in the AFL next year. Scott Salisbury was reported for striking by field umpire Mackey a few minutes after the Hines incident. Another scuffle broke out involving a number of players. The incident resulted in Glenelg having a 50-metre penalty awarded against it, with Darren Smith scoring a goal from it. It's likely Salisbury's charge will be heard with Hines before Commissioner Brian Martin when a time's been decided on tomorrow. Craig McGann for the 10 Evening News.